What's up, everybody? Welcome to Leaderboard Esports. I'm Judy Jetset. This is Jimmy Jimbasco. And here on Leaderboard Esports, we care about bringing you the pioneers of esports. We care about giving you guys an insight into the life of professional players across multiple games. So with us today, we have Hacks. He's a professional Melee player, peaked at top 6 in the world, known mostly for his Captain Falcon and his Fox play. He's also the pioneer of a controller called the Boxx. Can you tell us a little bit more about that controller?
Sure. So basically in competitive Super Smash Bros. Melee, the game is like widely regarded as one of, if not the best games ever made, especially among the people who play it. But one thing that just pops up time and time again would be problems with the GameCube controller. And these problems range from ergonomic problems to inconsistent performance. Pretty recently, actually, the Melee community pretty much accepted this modded version of the game that fixes some inconsistencies among these controllers that are just kind of archaic. Like it's just kind of a sign of like a game from 2001 that wasn't really made to.
I mean, yeah, that's what it is at this point, right?
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be competitive,
right.
But here we are 17 years later.
Yes, like down to the nitty gritty of it all.
Yeah, so honestly, it's not too big of a surprise that we eventually accepted like our own version of the game. It's minimally invasive. It fixes like just a few things that are wrong with it. But yeah, that's like half the problem. And then people like me are, we struggle with like the other half of the problem, which would be the ergonomic concerns with this controller. Basically, Melee is a game with like such an absurd game engine. You can do all sorts of jerky motions with the analog stick that just aren't good for your finger, your thumb, or your wrist, especially on the left hand. And recently, it caused a lot of people within the community to it caused these digital controllers to garner a lot of attention. That's what the Boxx is. Basically, people realized that there was a way to make digital controllers work for this game. It kind of flew under the radar for a long time because people figure, well, you've got your 4 arrow keys, but how would you accommodate all these coordinates for a game that runs on an analog stick? And eventually, a couple people proposed a controller called the Smashbox, which uses these things called modifier buttons. You can think of them as shift keys. It's basically like if you're holding up, but then you hold it in conjunction with the modifier, it'll give you like a slight press of up instead, just to like tilt the stick a little bit.
Okay.
And you can use this technology to basically play Melee in full.
Okay. Is Melee the only fighting game that actually uses tilts, or are there others? I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with fighting games, really.
Yeah, so a lot of fighting games are only 8-way.
Right.
And that's why like it was such a no-brainer that a standard hitbox controller, which is kind of like a keyboard, would work for these kinds of games because you've got your 4 arrow keys and that's all you need. For Melee, you need these things called modifier buttons that allow you to tap into all these other parts of the coordinate plane.
Right, to get really into
Yeah,
the
like
nuance
the slight shifts and everything. That's like a huge part of the gameplay.
Angles,
itself. Right.
yeah, like those arcade sticks are manufactured to actually only be able to move the stick in 8 directions.
Right, and it's like Zane was showing us, like on his controller himself, he has like these notches. Right. That he got in from modded, and these are all for the specific angles and specific things that he needs to be hitting, right?
And that's like a man-made thing. You can't get the controller out of the box like that, but people realize that you can modify the case of the GameCube controller to increase your precision in a few areas. Damn. And it's a pretty big advantage, honestly.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I could see how that would be crazy, but now you mentioned like the game engine, and that's what I want to really touch on for a second, because we mentioned at the beginning this game is 17 years old at this point, right?
Right.
Game engine. What separates Smash from all these other fighting games now? Like, is it the engine, or like what do they get right in, I guess, creating Smash?
So it's a style of game that many people have tried and failed to emulate, and I wouldn't necessarily say that the developers of the game ever really tried to emulate Melee in full, but they were never really able to recreate Melee. Basically, Melee is just like, the reason it's still here today is because it's a combination of a platformer and a fighting game. And that's just, when you think about it, one of the most, like, it's one of the biggest recipes for success you could possibly think of.
Yeah.
Because platformers are just like inherently complex, they're open world games.
Right.
If they're designed well. And then fighting games also have that same potential for like having this deeply psychological side to them that a lot of genres lack. So, yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Do you mean like, so is Melee you equate Melee to a platformer because you have to be so spatially aware, or do you want to go into more depth on why you think it? What about it? What's the platforming aspect of it? Is it really just the rules and like I'm overthinking it, or?
It's mostly the physics engine. Like Melee has this very complex physics engine that most of these games, like traditional fighting games that just run on that 8-way stick that I mentioned, they don't really have. You know, your character has like a very set speed that they can move to the left or the right.
Right, you're either walking or dashing, that's it.
Right, and they've got like a set jump animation.
Right.
They've got a crouch. Everything is like static. So Melee kind of breaks that entire barrier and just, it's almost like a Super Mario 64 kind of game. Where that game is still played because of how far you can push your skills in it.
Yeah, exactly. Speedrunning became a thing because people were pushing the limits of the game potential like every single chance they could, and they've been doing that with Smash for 17 years now, right?
Yeah,
that's
it's
pretty nuts.
Freaking nuts. And with the like conceptualization, with the design, with the invention of the Boxx controller, like, what's been the feedback from the community so far? Like, has there been huge acceptance as you're trying to make this switch to a digital format?
Okay, so there's like a lot of sides to this, I guess, because at first one of the biggest concerns with this controller was game balance, because this controller is like more effective than the notches that you can that you see this controller have.
Yeah, because
as great as those are, and those are like really good for guaranteeing that you put your analog stick in a specific location. Digital buttons are obviously even better.
Right, because they're going to be that no matter what, every
Guaranteed.
time. Right.
Guaranteed. So one of the biggest concerns when this controller first came out was just that it wasn't fair at all, because you are able to guarantee yourself all these like parts of the coordinate plane that are extremely difficult to pinpoint reliably.
Right.
Like there are techniques in this game that people straight up do not attempt because they verge on being humanly impossible.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's kind of a bad thing from a game design standpoint. I think you should never put something in a game if it's actually impossible, because then it might as well not be in the game.
Yeah, like what's the point, really?
There actually are things in this game where you either are not going to be able to pinpoint those coordinates consistently, or there's another aspect of the box that concern people. You'd have to do like a sequence of motions that would not be possible with a stick.
Right.
Like you can't go like left, right, and then immediately to up, like back to the center and then up, and that would give you something called a pivot up tilt.
Okay.
And that technique does not exist with an analog stick because of physical recoil on your thumb.
Right.
Yeah, so...
Oh,
man. Because it actually takes time for the material to cross space and like get there, but that's so nuts to me.
Exactly.
That's ridiculous.
So people were like, all right, well, this is the future.
Yeah.
But it's also not fair. And, the thing is, it was all theory at first. It was uncharted territory. No one had like actually gotten good at with one of these controllers yet. So I feel like I was the first person who actually reached like a high level of play with one of these controllers. Like I'm currently ranked 45th, which is pretty good. And like I think I'm better I think I'm better than 45th, to be honest with you. But regardless, about half a year goes by. So let's say last summer, I realized that this controller actually does need to be nerfed. At first my plan was to try to justify the perfect box that can literally pinpoint any coordinate on the plane, can do any sort of stick motion, like all the ones that were competitively concerning. And half a year goes by and I start to realize, okay, there's like this one area of the game that's way too strong. Ironically, it's exactly what this notch right here is trying to let you do.
Which one?
So I was pointing at the C stick. I meant to point at the analog stick. Basically, like if you put the stick right there, you're able to do something. You're able to do the steepest wave dash angle in the game. That's like a basic movement option.
Okay.
It kind of runs on like a sliding scale. You can do like a really weak wave dash all the way up to a strong wave dash, but no one's ever able to consistently pinpoint the strongest wave dash in the game.
Right.
That is pretty much impossible to do.
Consistently at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the controller you're saying would allow you to do that?
100% of the time.
Oh, God, yeah. So I could see how you would say that this one might need to be nerfed.
Exactly. So what I had to end up doing, like if let's say the wave dash range spans from like down here, like right where the quadrant starts, up to here, I keep my best wave dash on the controller closer to like the middle of the quadrant because what that does is it creates a healthy benchmark where it's viable. If this is like the best wave dash you can do, it's definitely viable. But someone who's using this controller can be rewarded for their skill. They can definitely surpass that digital button that I have.
So it's basically a limit you put onto the controller to limit its skills. I guess not skill ceiling, but the skill floor.
It's like, the number that I have is a very safe one to allow someone to pinpoint 100% of the time.
So that it's not overpowered every single time.
Exactly.
You do the wave dash.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It's like a very balanced number.
Okay.
I have a question off the back of that. What? Because in a sense, like in a cynical sense, you're effectively gatekeeping the maximum potential of this controller and thereby anyone who uses it. So what do you say about the angle of like, sure, okay, what if your controller effectively makes it too easy to execute some of the things that we know to be right now of like requiring a certain mastery to accomplish. But what stops this game from evolving even further? Why can't we say these are movements of the past? Why don't we evolve and consider that our standard? You know what I mean? What stops it? Because the game's been evolving for so long anyway, right? What stops us from saying, because there have to have been combos that you previously thought were godlike that are now commonplace.
Oh, I see what you're getting at.
So why aren't we evolving even further with the advent of this controller? Not necessarily, holding back for the sake of the people who can execute properly, but maybe thinking forward and letting them. Right.
Why doesn't the digital controller then become the norm so that the level of play can then go higher universally?
Can then elevate further.
So there's like definitely an argument for that. Kind of like how tennis moved on to steel rackets, like universally.
Yeah.
At first there was like opposition to it. I mean, whenever these kinds of things happen, you have to weigh logistics. Like logistics definitely comes into play. It's like, are you actually going to get like the majority of people on board with playing on a new controller?
Right.
So the answer, as far as what I just said, is definitely no. What you would basically have to do to allow some of the things that the Boxx has is you would have to change the game's software. You would have to improve this controller on a software level because you're definitely never going to reach a world where the majority of people are actually using a Boxx controller.
Right.
But you could do things like, say, on a software level, I'm going to make this angle easier, and then someone can still use this controller. So you're not like imposing so heavily. You're not saying like you must relearn the game in full just to play.
You just patch it.
Exactly. It's like a patch. Me personally, I'm not opposed to it. I'll play whatever like flavor of the game we approve of. But as it stands, the community only wants to standardize fixes to things that these controllers are inconsistent in performing, where like one of these could do something better than the other, and there's like no semblance of skill involving like why that controller does it better.
It could just be like wear and tear and stuff too, right?
Or even just manufacturing.
Yeah, it's a sketchy territory because it's like some of these things are like potentiometer malfunctions. Like if this analog stick malfunctions in like certain ways, it's advantageous. So you kind of like distribute the malfunction to everybody.
Okay.
There's like
So nice.
yeah, there's
like what?
That's literally what it is. And then there's like another one of these notches. Like these notches, people view these as I would say more intrusive than some other notches. There are some more like innocuous notches, I guess, for this other technique called shield drop.
Okay.
That the community is like on board with standardizing on a software level, so that people don't have to
go out of their way and get the notches done.
Yeah, because normally you would have to adjust the corners of quadrants 3 and 4. Like you would have to just adjust these by so slightly to put them on like a certain coordinate.
I think that's so ridiculous how people have got the like. they're modding their controllers plastics to get better at the game, dude.
No, that's
like,
a thing.
That's
it's
amazing.
ridiculous.
That's a thing. And the thing is, I know a lot of places you can notch not only this stick, but this stick to gain an advantage. Like the notches I just told you about, the shield drop notches, and these angle notches, those are by far the two most well-known ones. There are realistically, there's definitely over 10 places you can notch like either of those sticks.
What?
But a lot of them aren't so mainstream.
I
Okay.
feel like such a plebeian because I thought I was a nerd because I got a mechanical keyboard to play League on. Like,
Oh.
I don't even know what I'm thinking anymore.
Speaking of mechanical keyboards, so we were mentioning earlier, we were talking about Dragon Ball FighterZ, and we were talking about mechanical PS4 controllers. Are there, like, I know this is kind of like an off-the-road question, but mechanical switches for GameCube controllers or for Smash, for Melee specifically, do you think it'll come through or no?
Well, people already modify their controller's actuation force. That's actually a thing. And if people realize that, like, if more people realize that doing that was actually pretty good, it would probably catch on. So I feel like at that point, mechanical switches would be the next step. But you might actually have to manufacture like a new controller to make that work.
Right. Because I don't know how you would.
Yeah, like under
all that,
under
yeah.
these buttons, there's just like a plastic pad, and you can mess with that plastic pad in like a favorable way. I've never actually seen it how someone does it. Maybe you would like puncture it or something like that, something along those lines. But definitely no one's installing like new switches into these
Cherry
buttons.
MX switches.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's doing that.
Straight out of their keyboard.
You can mess with L and R a lot more because these things run on springs.
Yeah, I
so,
feel like the plunginess of it.
And you can hear it after a while.
yeah. So these, I'm sure there are people out there doing more complex stuff.